So everybody else, Waqas is a really good friend. I think we've worked now for about, मेरा ख्याल है मैं 15 से 20 साल 15 साल तो हो गए हैं कम से कम. We've been
जी
sort of
बिल्कुल.
working. I think 2-3 दफा हमने साथ भी काम किया है. We've done a bit of other works also. Waqas, like me, is also a FAST graduate and an alumni of FAST ICS Karachi, and he's the CEO of Avanza Innovation. And I'm now going to hand it over to him so he can also introduce himself to some extent and then talk to us about blockchain. Ji Waqas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jawad. Thank you very much, everybody, for having me today. So I don't know if you've heard of Avanza. We are a Pakistani software company, very proudly Pakistani software company. So we've been around for 20 years, and for the past 20 years, we've been doing a lot of channel banking, transaction processing, payment solutions. 3 years ago, I founded this new company called Avanza Innovations to focus on nascent technologies. So the objective was to obviously have another sustainable business for ourselves for the next 10-15 years. And while our existing product basket is sort of getting obsolete, we wanted to experiment with nascent technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, robotics. So think of Avanza Innovations as a startup coming out of a 20-year-old company. Today, 3 years later, we have the biggest market share in blockchain in the Middle East, North Africa region. We are doing 20 to 25 plus production grade implementations. The way I've structured today's session is that I will go through blockchain 101. I don't know how much awareness is there in the group today about what blockchain is and what is the underlying technology. I will obviously not go very technical. And once I've done that, I have broken down use cases and projects into 3 areas. So first is your home ground, which is financial application or usage of blockchain in financial regulation and supervision. The second area that I'm going to focus on is some trade and supply chain networks that we set up using blockchain. And the final is going to be digital government transformation. This is where government entities want to achieve paperless journeys for their residents and citizens. So we will cover, around 15 to 20 use cases without doing a very deep dive into all of them. A lot of content about these use cases and projects is available on our website, avanzainnovations.com. There are very interactive videos there as well, case studies over there. And obviously, I will be available for Q&A after the session today and later on. If somebody has interest in a particular use case or project, very happy to share details. All right, so moving on. So let me just switch on my pointers so you know where I'm pointing. Now, any software application that you have used up until today is developed using this architecture. You have a central server application, whether it is your HRMS system, your financial ERP, your attendance system in your corporations. All these applications have a central server, which is providing intelligence as well as data to all the clients connecting to the server application, right? This is typically the architecture of any software application, regardless of how much redundancy you put in the center. So if you're telling me, hey, we've got a high availability server, arrangement, and we've, replicated our data across, 4 locations, the architecture still remains the same, So basically, this is how software applications have been developed. This is what blockchain network looks like. So every node in the network, which is essentially a machine or a server or a computer, has the same data and the same intelligence. So that is why the first fundamental difference between a normal software application and a blockchain application is that this is a peer-to-peer network. This is not a client-server architecture where the data or the intelligence sits somewhere in the middle. So this is the first fundamental difference. Now, if I was to zoom into one of these nodes, which is essentially a machine or a server, I would see a list of transactions, data, asset registry, so on and so forth. Right? But everybody, all the nodes on the network have the same set of transactions. And when you look at these transactions, they are encrypted. So you cannot just find out what the data is. Encryption is inherent in blockchain. Encryption is not new. It's been around for 40, 50 years. But in the context of blockchain, it is much more relevant, and I'll explain that in a while. And it is inherent. You really don't have to write another layer of encryption on top of your open data. Data is encrypted in blockchain by default. Now, this is the most important part of blockchain or aspect of blockchain. Transaction history is locked in blocks of data. Now, let me give you an example. So again, we're zooming into one of the nodes over here and we're saying how data is stored. So this is how data is stored. Now imagine these are my patient records, right? So I went to the hospital for the first time in Dubai or in UAE in say January 2021. So my first record has been created, which is the Genesis record, which means the doctor would have diagnosed something, they would have prescribed something, and the findings of my visit to the doctor was stored in a database, and the first record was created. Then I went in January again. Then I went in February again. Sorry, this was my January visit. Then I went in February again, then in March, then in April. What happens in blockchain is that the subsequent block has a reference of all the previous blocks. So my April record has a reference of my March, February, and January record. Similarly, my March record has a reference of my February and January record. And how do they do it? They do it through hash values. A hash value is like a fingerprint. So if you write a document today, your CV, any application, and you apply a mathematical formula on it, it will generate a fingerprint of that document. Now, if you go back and change even a comma or a full stop in that document, the hash value will be different. So basically, every subsequent record in blockchain has a hash reference of all the previous records, right? So this is why this is called a blockchain. It is blocks of data chained together with hash values, right? This is why we say that data is immutable in blockchain, which means nobody can go in the past and change anything because everything is changed together and the whole chain will not match, or it will, raise alerts and bells and whistles if anybody goes and changes any data in the past, right? Now imagine my patient record stored in this way, not on just one node in one of the hospitals or with the Central Health Authority, but across a dozen organizations within UAE, right? So A, data is immutable. B, it is encrypted. 3, it is part of a peer-to-peer network where the key to the data is not available with one organization. So if somebody wants to compromise my data today, they will have to hack 51% of this network, which means 51% of the organizations who hold my patient record data will have to be compromised, which is not impossible, but unlikely and much difficult compared to a central point of failure or a single point of failure. This is why we say data is immutable in blockchain, and this is how it is spread across all these organizations. The next very interesting concept in blockchains is called smart contracts. Now, obviously, if blockchain is a multi-organization play, and it is a multi-organization play, it makes no sense to implement blockchain within an organization. And you'll see this in all the use cases that we discuss later today. If it is an inter-organization play, think of it as a glue that holds multiple organizations together through certain terms and conditions. So these terms and conditions are called smart contracts. Let me give you another example. So this is a simple smart contract between participants of a normal trade finance or a supply chain use case, right? So you have two banks here, the importers bank, the exporters bank, you have the port authority, you have the customs authority, and you have the logistics company. And the agreement between the buyer and the seller is this. This is a very, very simplified version of a real world, contract, but let's just go ahead with it. So 30% of the payment will be released when cargo arrives at the port, right? So this is something that they've agreed between us. 20% of the payment will be released when the customs gives a go ahead, and 50% payments gets released from the buyer to the seller when the logistics company delivers the cargo, right? Now, all of these organizations are connected through a blockchain network. There is no big one single blockchain, in this scenario. I mean, it's just better for me. It's for illustrative purposes, I've made this one big blockchain. Otherwise, imagine that all these organizations have their own blockchain node, just in the way I showed you in the last diagram in a peer-to-peer network. Now, what happens is that as and when the cargo arrives at the arrival port, the port operator stamps an event on the blockchain, which means their ERP system, whatever system they're using today for their port operations, calls an API on the blockchain node, which is hosted in their environment, and provides an information to the blockchain node. It says, I've received this particular container, this particular cargo, and they confirm this. What happens as a result is that this event gets fired automatically. So this bank automatically releases the 30% payment. Why? Because all the participants of this network have consensus on this particular event. They say, yes, this is a participating entity, the port authority. The way they have agreed or provided the information about this event, we all agree to it. We have, when we were setting up this network, we had all agreed that this event would take place. It is coming from a trusted source. It has the right data, the right container number, the right airway bill number, so on and so forth. So yes, there was a consensus achieved in the participating entities, and as a result, an event was fired. Similarly, the customs authorities, once they've inspected the cargo upon import, they, from their own customs clearance systems, fire an event on their own blockchain node. This event gets replicated across all the nodes. Everybody gives a big thumbs up into the system saying, yes, we agree. And the system fires the next event and 20% payment is released. Similarly, the logistics company says, I've delivered, and the 50% payment released. So what you see happening over here is a multi-organization, inter-organization workflow where the events are being generated by different participating entities, and the network is responding to it and moving the business along the way, right? So this is basically what a smart contract is in the context of blockchain. Now going back to our definitions. So this is what we've covered so far, that blockchain is a peer-to-peer network, which means all the nodes hold the same amount of data. Data is encrypted. We've understood how data is immutable, which means all the subsequent blocks are linked with the previous records, which means nobody can go in the past and change anything. And then obviously the data is replicated across all the entities. And we also understand, hopefully, what smart contracts are within the context of multiple organizations. So in the summary, what blockchain is an immutable, unforgeable record of all transactions across the network, and it replicates it on every node of the network through an inbuilt consensus mechanism. I'll not go into the mathematics of consensus mechanism because that will take us to a whole different tangent, but think of it as all the participating entities giving a nod into the network. All right, moving on. Some additional explanations. So I'm hoping you all understand that Bitcoin is not blockchain. Bitcoin was probably the first most popular application of blockchain, but blockchain is the underlying technology on which Bitcoin was built. My question to you is, why was Bitcoin built on blockchain? Why wasn't Bitcoin built on a client server application? And the answer is that if I was lucky enough to be present with you in an in-person class, and I would have taken a picture of all the people in this IBA class through my Android or Apple phone. And I would then go to IBA and say, this is a bunch of very smart people. And I've taken their picture in a group. And I would like to sell this picture to IBA for, say, 1,000 rupees. How would IBA make sure that I will not then go and sell this picture to anybody else? Because remember, we live in a physical world. And the transfer of physical assets, the regulation, the laws, the procedures around it have been developed, matured over thousands of years, right? So if I was to buy Jawad Bhai's car today, I would have 10 means of proving that this is my car now and not Jawad Bhai's car. That we would have signed a contract, the car would be parked in my house, I would be able to, claim ownership of that car. But if it's a digital asset, which means a picture on my smartphone, how will I be ensure that I do not then go and sell this picture to anybody else, to any other institute or newspaper? The way they would do this is that if, let's say that all the business schools in Pakistan is the universe that we live in, they are the inhabitants of the universe we live in, or the network that we live in. And once IBA has purchased this picture from me, they would go and inform all the other potential buyers of this picture, namely the other business schools maybe in Pakistan. Only then I would not be able to go and sell this picture to anybody else, right? So this transaction is actually stamped on all the nodes of the network. Everybody in the network whom I could potentially sell this picture to has been informed that the ownership of this picture is not with Waqas Mirza anymore, it is with IBA. This is why Bitcoin was launched on blockchain. It's a digital asset. So once the Bitcoin has changed hands between one person to the other, the entire network notes this transaction down on their little notebook, which is, the shared registry. So this is the reason why Bitcoin was launched on blockchain and it was not launched on, a client server application. This solves the double spend problem, which is the classic problem that, I shouldn't be able to sell an asset to multiple people. So it is a very important asset for ease of trading, digitized assets. The other thing that you also need to understand is there's a difference between private blockchain networks and public blockchain networks. So the cryptocurrencies, the Ethereums, the Bitcoins, all these blockchain networks are public blockchain networks, which means anybody can plug into that network and contribute to the compute and storage of that network. Because imagine, there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of transactions happening. So you need a lot of compute as well as a lot of storage to store these transactions. So you must have heard the concept of miners, Bitcoin miners or cryptocurrency miners. These are the people who basically plug in their server farms and contribute to the compute or storage of the network, and they make some money out of it. So once a Bitcoin is sold from one person to another, all the people who have contributed with their compute and storage to this transaction get a little bit of commission from that. So these are public blockchain networks whom anybody can participate in. Now, private blockchain networks are very different, and all the use cases that I'm going to talk about are private blockchain networks. That means 10, 15, 20, 50, 100 organizations have agreed to come together to solve a problem using this technology, right? So there's a clear distinction between public and private blockchains. All right, so we are done with our blockchain 101 introduction. We will now step into some use cases. I don't know what the protocol is of these sessions. Do I pause here for questions or do I carry forward? Jawad, what do you suggest?
No, you can carry forward. If we have questions, then the bachas will either raise their hand or post them on chat or interrupt you.
Okay, because I'm not looking at the raise hands or anything, so please feel
No,
free
I
to
will do
stop.
that. I will do that. And I think if I have questions, so far you're doing very, very well. So I think मुझ जैसे बिल्कुल खापड़ आदमी को ये सब चीजें समझ में आ रही हैं.
Mariam Taslim has raised her hand, so if you have a question,
Yeah.
I'd be
Mariam, go ahead, please. Please go ahead and ask.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question was if the example you gave of the picture that every potential buyers can see that this is the property of IBA. This raises a privacy concern because everyone can see how much assets someone else is dealing.
A brilliant question. So the way, so data is actually anonymized. So it depends on the network's protocols, conditions, agreements between different parties, and this will become evident in the kind of use cases that I'll talk to you about, that there are often competing organizations even in a private permission blockchain network. So the way you anonymize data is done through the programming logic that you use, but there can be both scenarios. You could have, you could nominate people, who are doing these transactions, or you could make them anonymous. This just depends on the business case or the way you've coded the application. But both options are available. All right. So now moving along. So this is the first use case that I would like to discuss. This is a very popular blockchain use case in the banking world. This is a E-KYC, know your customer, utility at a national scale. The objective of these platforms, and a lot of regulators are implementing this particular use case that I'm sharing with you is from Bahrain, where we've done this for the Central Bank of Bahrain, and Benefit is the operator. So think of Benefit in Bahrain as the one link of Bahrain. So they are the country switch, and they are a subsidiary of the central bank as well. So they're partially owned by the central bank and the top banks in Bahrain. This is the underlying product. You can again see a lot of details about this product on our website, avanzainnovations.com. And this is a project that we signed in 2019, I guess, somewhere in Q1, Q2. And we went live with it last year. There were delays, obviously, because of COVID. But now this is, like I said, a production grade implementation. I think they've gone live with 3 banks, and they're onboarding other banks continuously benefit. Now, what is a national E-KYC utility? Typically, you all, if I was going to get some bankers in the room. So when you do a KYC of an individual or a corporate, you never share this information with any other bank, and you share this with the regulator only if there's an investigation, right? So this is a utility at a national scale where banks rely on one another's KYC information and ride on one another's KYC information and build on top of one another's KYC information, giving collective wisdom and collective intelligence, actual vehicle, so this is an actual vehicle to achieve that. So I'll walk you through, one situation. So imagine I am a customer of a bank in Pakistan. Let's just go ahead with, say, Bank Al Falah. The CIO Mohib is a very good friend, so I'll go with Bank Al Falah. So I'm an account holder in Bank Al Falah. So Bank Al Falah, when they were opening my account, they would have done their due diligence, they would have done their KYC, and whatever information they gathered on me, they stamp it on their blockchain node. Again, there is no one big blockchain. Every bank has their own blockchain node. And from their core banking system, they would have called an API on their blockchain node. And my master record is now stamped on Bank Al Falah's blockchain node. This record or the hash of this record is also available on the nodes of all the other banks. Like we said, this is a peer-to-peer network. Data has to be same across all banks. What the other banks cannot do is they can never open this data. It would be an anonymous data for them of a customer without knowing who stamped this, where does the data has come from. This data is just shared with them, but there's no way they can unlock this data. And we do this through hashes, and hash, is a one-way encryption. It's not a two-way encryption. Now, say I need auto financing, right? And I would like a Sharia compliant auto finance product. So let's just say I went to Mizan Bank, which is Bank 3 in this case. And when I go to Mizan Bank, I say, hey, I want auto finance. Can you provide me a car loan? And they would want to do my KYC as well. In this case, what they do is they fetch my KYC records from their blockchain node. How can they do it? The trigger to unlock the customer's KYC data is different in different jurisdictions. In some jurisdictions, they use the dip of the national ID. So my NIC card and my biometric authentication and authentication from NADRA is a trigger to unlock my KYC records, because now the network or the platform is sure that this customer was physically present at one of the branches of this bank. That is why it is safe to assume that this customer wants to open a banking relationship with this bank. In some jurisdictions, they do it through an OTP, one-time password, which is a bit mediocre. In some jurisdictions, especially in the Nordics, they have provided these general apps to the customers, where through these apps, the customer provides their consent. So for the master record to be opened or somebody's KYC to be opened and be accessible to a bank, you need customer consent. And the vehicles to do this, to achieve this consent, can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and country to country. Long story short, Mizan Bank has access to my KYC records, which Bank Al Falah had stamped onto the network. Now, this does not sort of save Mizan Bank from doing their own KYC. As per the central bank regulation, the bank is obligated to do their KYC, but they have some base data that is available to them, which they can verify. So they can verify my residential address, my employment details, so on and so forth. And in doing so, they realized that there is some update. So I was, living in address X. Now I'm living at address Y. So when Mizan Bank pushes their version of my KYC data, which they've done, onto the blockchain, Bank Al Falah automatically gets an alert saying, hey, you have a customer whose KYC was done by another bank, and we found that these three fields of the KYC do not match with your KYC records. So whatever banks I have a relationship with in the country would get these proactive alerts whenever a new bank has done my KYC. So what you're doing in principle is you're making sure that everybody's KYC records match, and then the latest KYC record is available for all the banks. So now it depends on Bank Al Falah whether they want to call me up and figure out, whether I've changed my residential address, whatever. So the operations required to update my data on their blockchain node or in their systems is dependent on the bank. But the general objective is that KYC information is shared between all the banks as and when this customer opens a new relationship. And then KYC, as you may know, is an ongoing process. So it may happen, repeatedly. So whenever this process happens, all the banks get updated. This is the customer consent self-declared data that I was mentioning to you in different jurisdictions, especially in Europe and Nordics. Customer consent is provided through the mobile apps that customers have. The other thing is, I don't think this is very relevant to Pakistan, but in Gulf countries, especially where there are a lot of expats, there are a lot of documents that do get expired. Our visas get expired, our passports get expired. So our residential tenancy contracts, employment contracts, a lot of these things do get expired. And once these things get expired, the system generates proactive alerts to all the participating banks saying that, this customer's KYC information is outdated and you may want to change it or update it or call up the customer. So this is one of the utilities of blockchain. Now, illogical questions could be, why do you want to do this on blockchain? You could very well do this through a bureau model. You could have a central repository of national E-KYC hosted by one central entity. The first problem is, who would be that central entity? Typically, the objective of blockchain is to remove the middleman, not have a middleman. So again, this is a peer-to-peer network where there is no central authority. It's the collective wisdom of the participating entities and the network itself that is solving a big this problem. The other reason is that generally the countries, we are moving towards a digital age. Some of the countries are living in a digital age. So the national digital asset of any country is their data now. If you want to push back a country to Stone Ages, just go and compromise their data, and you've pushed them back to Stone Ages. That is why the data is seen as a national strategic asset, and data repositories such as tax records, land records, medical certificates, education certificates, KYC data is not being stored in a central repository anymore. You're creating a honeypot for somebody to break into. That is why jurisdictions, countries are moving the strategic data into distributed ledger technology and blockchain and all the other technologies where data, the key of the data shouldn't be with one organization, because some of these attacks happen from the outside. But inside threats are a bigger problem. If somebody has a key to your national digital asset, that's not a good idea ever. So this is why blockchain is a better vehicle to do this. We are not saying it cannot be done in a centralized model. It can be done, but blockchain solves a lot of other problems and risks which central application does not. The eventual idea for this is to be rolled out not just to banks, but to telcos and a lot of other government entities as well. So if a telco is issuing a SIM to somebody, they also do KYC. And the KYC that banks do is much more rigorous. That is why a subset of this KYC can be offered to the telcos as well, to different other government entities and private entities as well. So whoever requires, customer KYC can be a part of this platform, beyond banking institutions as well.
Waqas,
Yes.
just a quick question. So, and this is just, I think, for my clarity as well as for the students. So the question that I have is that, you've said two things that I want to sort of point out and highlight. One is, you said that the transaction record is immutable, so you can't go back and change it, right? And you've also said that the data is encrypted and is stored in a secure fashion. So my question is that encryption standards become easier, in a relative manner, to hack or break as computing power improves, right? So compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, what was completely non-breakable, 10 years from now would be like a piece of cake, because computing power and computational technology would have sort of skipped a couple of generations. So if you update the encryption standard, then what happens to the blockchain? One, and have there been instances of breaches happening on private chains? So that's two questions, two separate questions.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. They say that quantum computing is the biggest threat to blockchain. The day quantum computing becomes a reality, blockchain networks would be, people would be able to compromise blockchain networks, because then you would have the compute power to go and breach not just one organization, but multiple organizations simultaneously. But it is a catch-up game. So basically, most of our implementations are done on Hyperledger Fabric. Now, Hyperledger is a platform from Linux Foundation. So Hyperledger Foundation is a part of Linux Foundation. And the contributors of this platform are the likes of Intel and IBM and a lot of tier one blue chip companies. So encryption routines are getting updated. So there are new versions. So when we started with Hyperledger 0.6. Today, the latest version is Hyperledger 2.4. There are a lot of other enhancements that are happening in terms of optimization, performance, new consensus algorithm, as well as encryption. So I think SHA 5112 is the latest global standard of the best encryption. SHA 512 is the best encryption, but it is a catch-up game. So as and when compute power increases, I think encryption will also increase and become more complex. But yeah, it is what it is. So that is my answer to your first question. The second answer: am I aware of any private permission blockchain getting hacked? Not so far. The first reason could be that not a lot of production grade blockchain networks have seen the light of day. You're not talking about hundreds of implementations globally. You're talking about maybe dozens of implementations globally. So right now, these networks are not as prevalent. So maybe, in future, there would be attempts at least. And most of these attempts would be successful, I think, when they're inside jobs. Doing it from the outside is not impossible, but very unlikely, because compromising, or if somebody's left a loophole, if you've been very, very silly. So for example, you've developed a very, strong plumbing of blockchain, but you've left data entry through a web application, which is prone to human error as well as, SQL injections, for example. So that could at least, compromise some part of the data. So the hardening has to happen at a lot of levels. So blockchain is obviously one piece of hardening, but the APIs that are getting exposed, there are other things that are getting exposed. So the entire network has to be, or the entire platform has to be hardened from a lot of angles.
So Ismay, I think one quick follow-on question is, you mentioned one specific thing that caught my eye. You said that encryption standards do get upgraded, right? So if you've sort of moved on from one standard to the next standard, then essentially what needs to happen is that the new standard flows through all the nodes in the chain, right? So you update all the records and re-encrypt them, and then because of the consensus mechanism, you sort of have a new sort of data set, which is the old data set, but re-encrypted using the new standard. Is that how it works, or is there a different mechanism for flow?
Okay, so generally housekeeping of blockchain applications is much more difficult than other applications because there are multiple organizations and multiple nodes involved. So backward compatibility sometimes is there in certain cases it is not. So for example, Hyperledger changed its consensus algorithm from 1.4 to 2.0 version. Now there are customers that we have who have developed, their platform on 1.4 version, which is a different consensus mechanism, and now they want to enhance their network, have other participating entities join the network. Now we are having to upgrade the entire network on all the nodes because there's no backward compatibility, So, the new consensus mechanism is, I think, draft, and the earlier one was something else. There is no backward compatibility. So that is why we are having to go and do it on all the nodes, which I think is part of any new technology that is, getting matured. These are the downsides, that the cost of housekeeping and maintenance and enhancements is just much higher. That is why we really have to qualify whether a blockchain, whether a use case or a project should be done on blockchain or not, because these are expensive projects, not just to implement, but to housekeep and maintain as well. So in terms of encryption, the same thing would apply. You would have to go and do it on all the nodes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
No worries. All right, so this is a very scary diagram, especially for non-IT people. The S1, S2, S3s are your banks, basically. IGA in Bahrain is your Nadra, basically. So we do biometric authentication, so all the banks authenticate customers for customer consent through IGA. And then they have an API to this box over here, which is basically the platform. And the basic building blocks of this is we have a fraud engine over here. We have API metering because there's a commercial model around it as well. So the operator of this platform, which is Benefit, which you see, sitting at the bottom, makes money from this. So anytime a bank does KYC of a customer or fetches KYC information of a customer, whether it's a bank, exchange house, small finance companies, everybody has to be part of this network. It's sort of a mandate in Bahrain. Benefit makes money from it. So the operator of the platform has a commercial model around it. So this is not, just a science project. There's a business model around it as well, and it's decent money. Every KYC happening in the country, somebody making money from it is not a small amount of revenue. This is another sort of view of the application where there are different building blocks of the solution. This is deployed on Amazon cloud, because Amazon cloud is AWS is in Bahrain, and they have some sort of an arrangement with the Bahrain leadership and government that all government implementations have to be on AWS, which gives rise to another objection that we've been saying this all along, that blockchain has to be a peer-to-peer network where the key to the data shouldn't be one organization. And now you're saying, or I'm saying, that all the nodes of all the banks are hosted on Amazon cloud, which means AWS has keys to all the data. And you would be academically correct saying that, but there are some things that are academic and there are things that have to be done for practicality reasons. The clouds of today, the Azures, the AWS, the Google clouds, go a long way in ensuring and having us believe that the security there is all right. But this is anybody's guess. But academically looking at this implementation, if the whole network is hosted on a cloud, I would question the sanctity of data. So somebody if breaks into Amazon cloud, they break into the whole network. That is why a lot of our other implementations that I'll show with you are on-prem implementations, which means all the participating entities and nodes have their own blockchain node on their own premises rather than doing it on cloud. Okay, I will skip these slides. So these are different UIs, so typically everything happens through APIs, but for example, we've provided these housekeeping UIs as well, user interfaces as well. So for example, you see the KYC history of this customer, KYC being done on different dates. So if a KYC was done at one bank, the other bank gets these kind of alerts saying, hey, there has been a hash chain or a change in these fields of this customer, for example. So these are the proactive alerts that they get. But if they want to come and visualize it, is in a user interface, these are the kind of user interfaces they have. Okay, so this completes our first use case. The second use case that I'm going to be talking about is a bank trust network. Think of it as an artifact exchange network between banks. When we did our research for this, again, a lot of material is available on our website. This product is called Assure. So we figured out that there are 150 type of documents that banks, even in the most developed and digitized jurisdictions today, exchange in paper. These are your demand drafts and LCs and bank guarantees and performance bonds and clearance letters. A bank typically issues this letter, signs it, stamps it, provides it to the beneficiary or the beneficiary's bank. They look at the document, say, yeah, this looks okay, this is on the bank stationery, so it must be original, and they process it or keep it. And these documents are obviously exchanged in paper today. So this is a national vehicle, basically, which helps banks exchange this information digitally. And when I say digitally, I of course don't mean PDF scanned copies. I mean the data is shared digitally between these banks. It's a very simple application. Every bank can host their own blockchain node. Again, no middleman. You can define the templates of different documents. What would my bank guarantee look like? How many fields? I mean, a bank guarantee typically has 5 to 6 fields, right? The beneficiary name, amount, expiry date, so on and so forth. No liability letters. So you define the templates of these documents, and then you have these banks stamp these documents onto the network, and the customer consent again enables the sharing of these documents from one bank to another. So this is basically what the platform is. I won't go into a lot of detail of this because I mean it's a very simple application. It's a no-brainer basically, and we've digitized all these documents through this application. We use zero knowledge proof as well. In blockchain world, zero knowledge proof means that when you're sharing information with somebody, they don't need to know everything. So let me give you an example. So if somebody wants to know that you have a valid driving license, they don't need to know your date of birth. They only need to know whether you have a valid driving license. So this is zero knowledge proof, right? So basically what happens if somebody can go to this platform and say, is there a bank guarantee for this beneficiary of this amount expiring on this date? And the system will give a thumbs up or a thumbs down saying, yes, this kind of a document was issued by a bank and it is valid as of today. So for a lot of documents, we don't actually reveal the document to the beneficiary or the beneficiary's bank. We actually, share this information through zero knowledge proofs. Okay, the third platform that I'm going to discuss with you is UTC Uae Trade Connect. This is a national trade finance platform launched by Etisalat over here. Etisalat is the operator. We've built it. Avanza has built this platform for them, and 9 of the biggest banks of UAE are part of this, and there are, I think, another 4 banks joining this. So the problem that this particular platform solves is invoice discounting frauds. Invoice discounting, I'm assuming most of you would know. If you don't, I'll just explain it in a minute. So invoice discounting means that I am an SME. Let's say Avanza is an SME, and I have a receivable from my customer, say, DP World of $500,000, right? Now, DP World is going to pay me $500,000, but they're going to pay me in 60 days. I've raised my invoice, but the payment terms or payment duration is 60 days. I can take this invoice to my bank and say, hey, this is my receivable of $500,000 from this particular customer. My customer is going to pay me in 60 days. Can you finance this invoice for me to help my cash flows? My bank will do the due diligence on this invoice. They will probably call up my customer as well, make sure that the trade is legitimate, the invoice is legitimate, and then they will invoice 60, 70, 80% of this invoice to me so that, during these 60 days, I have, cash flow. So this is a global product that banks offer to SMEs all over the world to help SMEs with their cash flows. The problem in UAE is that there are a lot of frauds in this area. As an SME, I can seek financing from Bank A, I can seek financing from Bank B, I can seek financing from Bank C against the same underlying trade or invoice, and then I'll disappear from the country and never come back. Banks work in silos. There is no, central body that can do this, that can tell a bank, hey, whatever invoice you're financing or the trade that you're financing has already been financed by another bank. There's no vehicle available in most countries, by the way. So this is a platform that addresses this problem. It makes sure that the invoice financing or invoice discounting is legitimate and it's not duplicate. So again, there's a video and a lot of information available about this platform on our website as well. TradeBridge is the underlying product. So yeah, we signed this project again in 2019. We are in the final leg of, there's a parallel run happening for the past 3 months. We are supposed to go live, I think, next week or first week of April. There's some documentation that needs to happen in terms of service agreements between banks and Etisalat. Again, there's a solid business model around this. Etisalat is the operator of this platform. For every invoice that gets verified on this platform, they charge the bank. So this is Etisalat setting up a complete new line of business for them for the next 20 years at least. So every invoice that will get verified in this country or will get financed, Etisalat is going to make money from it, because they're providing this platform to ensure that the trade is not duplicate. Okay, this is a very exciting project for Avanza because it is a fusion of a lot of nascent technologies. We obviously use blockchain network because we don't want all these banks to dump their invoices in a centralized repository, again, creating a single point of failure, a honeypot for somebody to break into. So that is why it is a peer-to-peer network where a bank's invoice detail is available with them. The hash of it is available with all the other banks as well, but they obviously can't see what's inside it. So that is why blockchain is the fundamental network architecture. The reason why we are using AI and machine learning is because people who do these kind of frauds. So if I want to play the system and I'm going to present my invoice to bank A and then to bank B, I will change the invoice. I will change the description of goods. I will change the invoice number. So straight matching doesn't work here. So you have to do a lot of fuzzy matching to detect frauds. We've seen invoices in which no two values of the invoice matched. It was from the stamp of the company or the logo or the signatures that we figured out it's the same company. So there's a lot of object detection models that are at play. And there's a machine learning model that constantly learns the type of frauds that have been happening and then tries to improve the safety net. The other thing that also happens is we have over a period of time will build personas of traders as well as prices. So if somebody is importing steel billets into the country, everybody else who is importing steel billets into the country is also using the same platform. So the persona of steel billets and the price of steel billets would have a range in the application, right? If somebody is inflating that value, by a large extent, it means they're trying to play the system by over invoicing, because people who do these kind of frauds tend to inflate their invoices as well, because they then get a bigger chunk of financing from the bank. So over invoicing, illegitimate trade. So there's a lot of checks that are happening on the buyers and sellers through our bots. We have a lot of crawlers that go on the web, go to different regulatory authorities, make sure that the buyer and seller are legitimate authorities. So for example, if there's a seller from China, we would go and check whether this seller has a web presence or not, they have a website or not, so on and so forth. So there are personas that are being built within the application, and then there are third-party sources that we use to understand the underlying, trade legitimacy. The solution is such that a bank would upload the invoices data onto the platform, either through an API. We have given a web-based interface as well, but that was mostly being used to test the application while the banks were building on their APIs. But generally, the bank's trade finance systems would upload the data onto their blockchain node. Let me take you through the next screen. This is a better illustration. So this bank uploads their trade or invoice data for a financing case onto their blockchain node. This data is obviously replicated across all the nodes. Etisalat, which is the operator of the network, is the only entity which can look at this data and understand what it is. For everyone else, this is just garbage. Etisalat needs to do this because the rule engine runs centrally. Now, this was another, sort of challenge that we had in the project when we were designing this, or when we were conceiving this jointly with Etisalat and the banks. You cannot run analysis of this magnitude and this depth on a blockchain network with all the blockchain nodes. Performance-wise, it doesn't make sense. You need data in a centralized repository. That is why even in a blockchain system, when you have to write your dashboards and business intelligence reports on the data of blockchain, you also have an off-chain database. You have a RDBMS, or a relational database, on which you can query, because for analysis and reporting, blockchain is not the best source of data in terms of performance. So for data sanctity, auditability, immutability, blockchain is very good and very nice. For reporting, performance-wise, there are issues right now. So we had to replicate data on Etisalat node, at least some data, not all data. So all invoice data or trade data is not replicated on Etisalat node. Some fields which have been permitted by the bank, and we had to take central bank's approval for that. These banks had to take consent of their customers that your data will be eventually shared with a entity outside the bank. So a lot of fencing, had to be done, in terms of regulation and customer confidentiality, so on and so forth. This is where our rule engines run. We run our, fuzzy matching, and then as a result, the bank finds out its score, whether they should finance this invoice or not. And this overall score has a lot of subcomponents in terms of, financial crime risk, duplicate checks, so on and so forth. So this is how the system works. And then the decision that the bank has taken on the financing is then stamped onto the blockchain again, and it's available for everybody. The other banks can't get to see who has financed this invoice, but they can see that this invoice has been financed.
Waqas? Sorry, quick question. Can I go ahead and ask?
Yes, please.
So I think the first question is what kind of an error rate came up when you sort of deployed your fuzzy logic AI engine on the recognition side? That's one. And I think the second question is from the vendor's point of view, not you, but the platform operator's point of view. If they do make an error, so they do miss duplication or they sort of do call out something, is there any liability or is there no liability? Two questions. Thank you.
Okay, so since we've not gone live, we've been in a parallel run for the past 3 months. We have been told by FAB, at least First Abu Dhabi Bank, that they have caught 2 cases during the parallel run. And this was discussed in the steering committee meeting as well. Basically, they used this as an incentive for the other banks who were sort of not, participating in the parallel run as actively. And they said, guys, we've already started to see the benefits of the platform. Why aren't you, punching your invoices into the system? So we know that FAB has caught 2 cases. One was for a duplicate invoice with another bank, and one was a duplicate finance case within the bank. So the banks at times even overlook that they themselves so
mute Karlin, please. Whoever has his mic on, please mute it. Thank you. Sorry, Waqas, go ahead.
No worries. So there have been 2 cases that I'm aware of that the system has detected. Now, in terms of liability, see, when this was taken to the central bank, obviously, the regulator does not sort of endorse these kind of platforms. They stay at an arm's length. A central bank is part of the steering committee meeting. They had a bunch of questions from Etisalat, and one of the questions was this: that if a fraud happens through this platform, where does the liability go? And then Etisalat has a back-to-back agreement with the banks, which I am not aware of, because we are the plumbers for this, we are the builders for this. But I think Etisalat is not taking any liability. They're just saying we are facilitators in this. We're not giving any kind of guarantee on whether this is a 100% foolproof system or not, because that's how the system is also designed. The system doesn't give a Boolean decision. It doesn't say go ahead or don't go ahead. It just says this is my assessment, and it gives a rate, a weightage, a score to the bank. It doesn't necessarily tell the bank to go ahead or doesn't go ahead, not go ahead with the financing. So I don't think they're taking any liability on this.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I mean, like I said, most of it is plumbing, but we do have some UIs for you to visualize what happens. So basically, banks upload their invoices over here. There's an OCR component. Obviously, these invoices, we read data from it. For OCR precision, we've trained the OCR models as well. This is the kind of outcome that comes out. So this here, the system is saying this is 100% duplicate invoice. I found an exact, trade data somewhere else. In terms of these tabs that you're seeing on the top, these are the different sub-scores. So this would be a score for the invoice, for the supplier, for the buyer, for the products and duplicates. And then the financial crime risk on this is 30%. UTC has said that this is failed. Whether the bank wants to fail this, process this, or reject this, it's up to them. So they will have to select a decision and then mark this decision. So these are the different data from the invoice, from the supplier, different logos and stamps that we come out and then match and then tell them, we tell the bank, this is why we are, giving a rate, this kind of a rate based on the different images that we've gotten from the invoice. The price and the items are done, checked, and then, these are the kind of results the banks get. So this is UAE Trade Connect. Basically, yeah. So this was my third application of blockchain. This is one of our first, in fact, the first blockchain project that we did for Dubai government. This is the reconciliation and settlement of government funds on blockchain. So this is a financial play, but not, a banking play as such. So basically, again, a lot of information is available on our website for this platform. This project was signed back in 2017. The problem that we were solving is that Dubai has a payment gateway called Dubai Pay. This payment gateway facilitates payments of government services. So there are some 40 government entities that are connected to this, such as police and road and transport authority and a bunch of other government entities. So whenever I have to pay my services that I'm seeking from one of these government entities through their mobile apps or through their websites, this is the payment gateway that facilitates my payment. So think of it as any e-commerce payment gateway, but this is specific to government entities only. Now, the problem is that when say I'm topping up my road toll, Salik over here. So I'll go ahead, I'll go to RTA's website, the Roads and Transport Authority. I'll top up my Salik. This is the payment gateway Dubai Pays page or plugin that I will see. I will fill in my banking details, my debit card or credit card details. The transaction will go to my bank. My bank will check whether I have adequate funds or not, and the transaction will be done. So there is no problem at the payment leg, right? The problem happens at the back. So we've got Department of Finance, which is basically running Dubai Pay, right? Smart Dubai and Department of Finance. And Department of Finance is also the custodian of the revenue of the city is making. So Department of Finance is receiving through Dubai Pay all this revenue for these 40 government entities and through the 15 banks that are connected to this payment gateway. The Department of Finance used to take up to 45 days to reconcile their books with these 40 government entities and 15 banks. So what's happening is that these transactions are also getting stamped on the ERP systems of these government entities and on Dubai Pay, right? But for Department of Finance to make sure that their books match with the books and the ERP systems of all these 40 government entities, it is classic way of Excel files going back and forth, making sure everybody's books match. This is the problem that we've solved through blockchain, where reconciliation and settlement should happen in real time rather than happening 45 days later. Now, reconciliation, by the way, is a global problem. So when you take your Mobiling Jazz or Uphone or Telenor SIM, you go visiting 3, 4, 5 countries, at least you used to before COVID. When you come back to Pakistan, you potentially bring a nightmare back for your telco, because they have to go and reconcile your roaming charges with all the other networks that you've used in those countries, right? In the aviation industry, if you're, booking a direct flight from, say Dubai to JFK through Emirates Airline, but from New York to, say, Alabama, you're flying American Airlines or Continental, Emirates is doing this entire thing for you. So they have to go and reconcile your booking charges for that leg with American Airline and Continental. So reconciliation is a problem that exists across a lot of countries. And why does this problem exist? This problem exists because despite APIs and data exchanges and EDIs, electronic data interchanges between all the organizations, at the end of the day, all these organizations are looking into their own ledgers, ERP systems, right? And they say, hey, just to be sure that my ERP system and my ledger matches with yours, why don't you send me your records and I'll send you my records and we'll make sure that our records match. Because everybody is working in a silo. They're not looking at a shared ledger. They're looking at their own ledgers, and things could go wrong, right? Their systems could malfunction. A message might have been missed. An acknowledgement might not have been sent. and this is a lot of money we are talking about, So that is why reconciliation exists, and there's a lot of inefficiency around reconciliation that also exists in a lot of industries. Now, one problem that we solved in this particular context is that we wanted to reconcile the books of 40 government entities and Department of Finance and the banks in real time. The other thing that we wanted to give is a real-time, accurate view to the leadership of the city about how much money did the city make today. If this is the revenue that you're collecting for your 40 government entities, this is essentially the city's revenue. So before this project, if the leadership of Dubai was to ask the Department of Finance, say, how much money did my city make today? They would say, we'll be able to tell you 45 days from now, because we know how much we've made, but we're not sure we're doing a reconciliation. So the other problem that we solved is that there was no visibility of how much the revenue the city made today. Today, now they can say, in real time that this is how much we've made. Okay, how did we solve this problem? Now I'll walk you through a transaction and you'll understand exactly what we did in this system. So imagine same, case that I'm topping up my road toll, Starlink, and I go to the website or the mobile app of RTA, which is Roads and Transports Authority, and I start topping up my Starlink for say 500 dirhams. Now, as and when I start doing this transaction, the ERP system of this government entity would know that I'm doing this, right? So they would stamp this event on their ERP system that I have initiated this transaction, but we've also given a blockchain node to this particular government entity. So asynchronously, without disturbing the transaction time, this event is also stamped on the blockchain node of Roads and Transport Authority. Secondly, this is stamped onto the blockchain node of Dubai Pay. So Dubai Pay also has a blockchain node, and the same event is stamped on the blockchain node of Dubai Pay as well. Dubai Pay, after receiving my debit card or credit card details, would send this transaction to my bank. My bank, Emirates entity, say in this case, would look into my bank account, say, check whether I have 500 dirhams in my account, would debit my account, and then send the authorization back. And this event is also stored on the Dubai Pay node. And then finally, the final acknowledgement from Dubai Pay would go back to RTA saying that the transaction is complete. Now, after all these 5 legs of this transaction has been done, you essentially have 3 blockchain nodes, one with RTA, one with Dubai Pay, and one with my bank. When all these 3 entities or 3 blockchain nodes have this transaction on their ledger, what happens next? The consensus mechanism kicks. All 3 nodes give a big thumbs up into the system saying, yes, we agree, this transaction has happened, and this is the amount, and this is the date, and this is the beneficiary, and this is the bank, so on and so forth. And what this does is that you have reconciliation. Because in blockchain, there is no gray area. You either agree or you do not agree. All the participants agree because they're all looking at the shared ledger. So all these 3 entities are looking at this shared ledger through their own blockchain nodes. The consensus mechanism is achieved, and I've achieved reconciliation in real time as and when a transaction is happening. So this is how we've solved this 45 days lag and achieved instant reconciliation. What happens next is that my smart contracts kick in, and these funds are transferred to the relevant government entities, and the commissions are transferred to the banks. Now here, Department of Finance wanted a manual step. They wanted somebody to click a button for these funds to move, and I really don't blame them. And we could have automated this, but this is billions of dirhams moving, So they wanted a maker checker and a second eye concept over here. But settlement was never the delay. The delay was actually reconciliation. So reconciliation happens. We build the transaction of reconciled transactions, say for the past 6 hours. Put them in a batch, present it to Department of Finance, somebody clicks a button, and these funds are moved to the relevant government entities on whose behalf they were collected, and the commissions are disbursed to the banks. And then, like I said, you have real-time visibility of cities' revenue with certainty, with a breakup of how much electric and water authority made today, how much did police collect today, how much did Roads and Transport Authority. So Department of Finance can now tell the leadership at any point in time, in real time, this is how much funds my city made today, or revenue my city collected today. Obviously, to stitch this kind of an application together, blockchain generally, I mean, on all our implementations, blockchain typically is 30 to 40% of the surface area of these solutions. Blockchain solves a very specific problem, of immutability or reconciliation or decentralization. But for these systems to work, and for us to stitch them together with all the bells and whistles, there's a lot of peripheral software development that is also required. So you have to take into account, exception management, refunds, disputes, what happens when somebody's blockchain node goes down, how does the chain reconcile itself? There's some human processes that you have to bring in. So there's a lot of peripheral development that also happens along with blockchain. Yeah, this is just a current state versus past state analysis. This is how things used to happen in the past. There were a lot of delays. Now everything is real time, immediate reconciliation, same day settlements. Yeah. So this is an old slide. I think we've got much more transactions on the blockchain now. And there's a count of 50,000 transactions every day on Dubai Pay. And the system has been live for 2.5 years now. So I think the number of transactions are much more than 12 million. Okay, we've done a similar implementation for Etisalat. I questioned this implementation, but Etisalat was very clear. Their engineering team was very clear that they wanted to do an in-house within the organization blockchain implementation. And I told you at the onset, blockchain within an organization makes no sense. The problem that they've tried to solve, and I'll not spend a lot of time over here, is they've got 15, 20 systems through which they get different types of data to service customers. So for example, the device that is installed in my house from Etisalat, the modem that is stored in my house would be stored in one system. The billing data is in another system. Field staff uses another system. And they had major reconciliation issues. So only when a field engineer would come to my house for some troubleshooting, would they know that the device in my house is issued in somebody else's name. So it's a mess, and generally it is, in large telcos. So this is a solution that they've put in place where data from 20 different systems is being reconciled, flagged, exceptions generated, and then data is cleansed, using this application. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to go into the details. This is a reconciliation problem within an organization. I think this is the last use case that we're going to discuss under this category, which is, financial regulation and supervision. This is a loyalty marketplace concept. Basically, we've done this for Etisalat again. Etisalat has a loyalty program here called Smiles. Through Smiles, basically, Etisalat provides a lot of vouchers for some 250 merchants. If I'm a Smiles member, based on the points that I've earned through my talk time or my data consumption, there are some 250 merchants where I can go and I can redeem these points. Now, the way I would redeem these points is that I'll go to this merchant, I'll go to the teller, I'll show my application. There'll be a lot of confusion at the teller, they won't know what I'm asking for. The manager would be summoned and the manager will say, oh yeah, I know we have a partnership with Etisalat. So this person is probably here to redeem their points. They'll give me a voucher of 200, 250 dirhams, whatever, my points accumulate to, and then I'll be able to shop using these points. Now, Etisalat realized that, we were a bit of spoiled brats in Dubai over here, and people don't necessarily like this hassle of redeeming their points, right? They don't want to drive to the mall, go to a merchant and then redeem their points. So a lot of Etisalat consumers are not redeeming their points, which means they've created a legal liability for Etisalat, even though these points have an expiry date. But for any successful loyalty program, the points have to be redeemed. Otherwise, it's not a successful loyalty program. So what Etisalat has decided to do is they've decided to set up a marketplace, which means they want to enable me to be able to purchase a 200 dirham flash disk, USB flash disk, from Carrefour or Sharaf DG from within the app, rather than having to go to that merchant and then shop, through a voucher. What this would entail is that all these 250 merchants would have to be able to push their SKUs and catalogs onto the Smiles app, onto the loyalty programs app. And I, as a consumer, should be able to choose and select. Similarly, they want a lot of digital stores to be provisioned, which means if I'm a gamer and I want an upgrade to a game, or if somebody has a child and they want to buy them something from an Android store and an Apple store for $10 or $15, they should be able to use Etisalat's loyalty points to be able to do that. This is what their vision was. They wanted to convert their loyalty program app into one of the biggest e-commerce marketplaces in the country. Objective 2 was to also create a loyalty point exchange. And this is a gap in many countries where a lot of us are carrying a lot of loyalty points, but these points are not interchangeable. So I can't exchange my Smiles loyalty points from Etisalat with Emirates Sky Miles, for example. Or I can't change Emirates Skywards Miles with Sherwood Hotels. They all work in their silos. So this was the second objective, to create an exchange of loyalty points in the country where other loyalty points providers and their customers would be able to exchange their loyalty points with Etisalat Smiles points and vice versa. So yeah, this is a complete tokenization of loyalty points solution that we did for them. The first thing is the reason why blockchain was used is because, number one, if you want to onboard 250 merchants and you want to do it through a centralized API system, it's a 5-year project easily. Doing it in blockchain is a faster approach, especially for the more established merchants. They can just set up their own blockchain node and start pumping their data. They don't have to, connect with a central server. The second biggest usage and reason for doing this on blockchain again was reconciliation. If you're doing these small transactions of $10, $15 across 250 merchants, Etisalat will need an army of people in their finance department to solve the reconciliation mess that this will bring. You will have disputes, you will have customers saying something else, the merchant saying something else, there's a paper trail, there are, the different vouchers and receipts, so on and so forth. So that is why doing it on blockchain, doing it using a shared ledger that the customer, the merchant, and Etisalat is looking at simultaneously is a much better vehicle to do this. So yeah, this is, I don't want to go into the technical details, but this is the business objective, creating a loyalty marketplace with these merchants, and then, have real-time reconciliation and settlement with them as well. So yeah, this is, now this system is launched. It's been live for the past, I think, 4 months now. And basically now Etisalat can have a real-time view of how many points are allocated, how many are redeemed across which merchants. In terms of loyalty exchange, they've gone live with 2 loyalty point providers. So ADNOC, which is Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, so one of the fuel station chains. So ADNOC loyalty points, GEMS schools loyalty points. So GEMS school is one of the biggest networks of schools in UAE, and Smiles program. So now if your child is going to GEMS school and you have some loyalty points there, you can exchange it for Smiles. Or if you're an ADNOC loyalty point member, you can exchange it with Smiles and vice versa. Or GEMS and ADNOC Smiles points can also be exchanged. So Etisalat is now working as an operator. And again, there's a business model behind it. Now, when Etisalat is becoming an operator of this loyalty exchange, they charge commissions from these loyalty point providers. So they make money from this as well, not just from their own customers' retention. It's not about customer retention only. There's a business model around this as well. All right, so we are done with use cases for financial regulation and supervision. If you want, I can pause here and take questions if you have any.
I have one, and I think it's from, I think, one of the 2 or 3 cases earlier when you spoke about refunds and adjustments and changes. I'm assuming that basically means that in the blockchain, you actually have a series of transaction records on that one transaction or linked to that one transaction that give you a proper picture. Is that a correct assessment or is that incorrect?
That's correct. So basically a block of a transaction would have multiple blocks, and each block would be an event that has happened on that transaction. So like I said, so if one party has said that, yes, I have received this transaction, that would create a block. When the bank says I've authorized this transaction, that would create, so the entire life cycle of that transaction across all the organizations is a block on that transaction.
But then when it comes to, as you said earlier, when it comes to reporting and dashboarding and analysis and analytics, then you actually have an off-chain database that has all the data in it to run those reports and numbers.
That's correct. Yeah, that's purely because of performance reasons, because data isn't inherently encrypted in blockchain. So that is why, running real-time reports, by decrypting the data, and then fetching thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of records in some cases, has a lot of performance overhead. So that is why an off-chain data is maintained.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think there's a question from Alishma in the chat, and her question is: are there any network-specific conditions for using blockchain technology in an organization?
If you mean network protocol, so for example, when you set up a blockchain network with, you'll use an underlying blockchain platform like Hyperledger Fabric or Quorum or Corda. These are blockchain platforms. Now, when you set this up between your organization, so you have a node in your organization and you have a node in another bank or in some other partnering organization's network, there is a certain, I think there's a gRPC protocol that has to be opened. So it comes down to firewall rules and protocols, basically. There are certain ports and firewall rules that have to be opened on the network for these two blockchain nodes or multiple blockchain nodes to talk to one another between organizations. And it's pretty straightforward. They talk on a specific protocol, which is, I think, gRPC, as far as I remember. It's like, HTTP or other networks. gRPC is another, protocol, and they work on certain ports. I don't know if this was the question, related to networks, if network provisions.
Alishma, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next area. I've got 3-4 use cases here. This is supply chain and trade networks and how blockchain is helping, put them together. So the first platform that I want to discuss with you is Digital Silk Road. Now, Digital Silk Road is a 10x government initiative in Dubai. 10x initiatives in Dubai are generally directly monitored by the leadership, so the crown prince or the ruler of Dubai is directly looking at these projects. Now, the objective of Digital Silk Road is to have a one-stop shop, or to become one-stop shop for all trading needs of the city for any trader. So there's a trader that is in the imports and exports business. Any interaction that they have with the government in terms of seeking NOCs, health certificates, if they're exporting food products, licenses, certificates of origin, all these documents should be digitally available to this person. And the workflows that are involved in seeking these documents have to be digitized as well. Okay. Now, these projects are not being done by accident. They're part of a bigger 2030, 2025 vision of the country from which these projects are coming out. And one of the objectives or 2030 or 2025 vision objectives is to become a paperless city. So this is along those lines. These projects are being done along those lines. Now, this is a multi-year project, which will have a lot of use cases coming in subsequent years. There are 2 use cases within this big platform that we've already implemented and that have been live since 2019. The first use case that we did was unification of traders registration. Now, if you're a trader in the city and you have to import even a single container of goods or export a single container of goods, you have to, first of all, register yourself with your licensing authority. So if you're a mainland company, the Economic Department is your licensing authority. If you're a Jawza company, Jabal Ali Free Zone is your licensing authority. So anybody who is issuing you your trade license is your licensing authority. So that's the first registration. Then you have to go and register yourself with Dubai Trade, Dubai Chamber of Commerce, Dubai Customs, and DP World, which is the port authority. So you have to have separate registration, which means there are separate KYCs that are happening on you by these 5-6 entities. The first building block that we set up for Digital Silk Road was unification of this trader registration. We said, if somebody has gotten their trade license from their licensing authority, all these other entities, this information would be relayed to them, so that this trader doesn't have to go door to door and get themselves registered with all these. So this made sense as the first, building block of this thing. And again, why was this done on blockchain? Because we didn't want a single repository. Everybody has their own data. The keys were agreed, the fields were agreed between all the entities, and we started relaying information to different authorities. The second use case that we've already gone live with is called the export authorization process. Now, if you're exporting anything out of a country, you need a lot of documents, depending on what you're exporting. But the common document, for example, the first document that you need is a certificate of origin. So typically what happens is that Chamber of Commerce simply issues this document for any country. You go to the Chamber's website, you upload your invoice and packing list, and then they issue you certificate of origin. You attach the certificate of origin with your export declaration and you file it with customs. And after the customs, you have to file, a lot of documentation with the port authorities. What we've done is we've made this complete journey digital. So everything happens through this digital Silk Road platform on the front ends of these government entities. So everything is stitched in the back end. So the plumbing is done in the back end, but once information is provided to one organization, it is automatically relayed to the other. And then there's an information flow backwards as well. So when the container leaves the port or leaves the vessel or the vessel leaves, this container information is relayed back to the different entities saying, yes, we know, that this thing has been exported or these goods have been exported. So this is the second, use case that we've gone live with. There are many more use cases that we're currently working on. And I, for some reason, cannot disclose them because that is not public knowledge. These two use cases are public knowledge. But in terms of ease of trade and ease of doing business, multi-organization journeys are being made paperless using blockchain. That's the main theme, behind all these use cases. The next project that I'd like to discuss is the logistics chain. This is an initiative by Dubai Customs. Again, driving from the 2030-2025 vision of the city or the country, one of the key objectives that Dubai wants to achieve is that, okay, we are the trading hub of the region, and we know that next 10, 15 years is going to be a major boom in the e-commerce business because of the way it is taking off, or it has taken off. Dubai wants to be the hub for as many e-commerce companies as possible. So they want to be the most attractive city in the entire region for e-commerce companies to set up shop. How do you attract e-commerce companies? You attract e-commerce companies by solving one of their biggest problems. One of the biggest problem in the e-commerce business is returned goods and items. And when we were doing this project, we were informed, I didn't know this myself before, that 45 to 60% of the items in any e-commerce business are returned items. They're either damaged goods, they're items that customers do not like, and they return them. And the snowball effect of these returned items is so big that a lot of e-commerce companies go bankrupt just because of this reason. And one of the biggest leakages in the returned items, financial leakage, is the double duties that the e-commerce company has to pay to the customs authorities. Because when a product is being imported from overseas, by the e-commerce company, the customs authority sees it as an import. But when the customer rejects that item or returns that item, the customs does not have the ability to see this airway bill number or this item as the same item that was imported into the country. So the e-commerce company obviously cannot charge the customer because, obviously they have to do customer retention as well. So they have to pay double the duty to the customs on the export leg as well. This is the problem that this platform is solving. So basically, last year we did a pilot between DHL, Dubai Customs, and 3 e-commerce companies. The objective was to have all these organizations become part of a blockchain network and then exchange information about e-commerce goods getting imported into the country through this platform. So, this is the one-way flow. And then when the item is returned, basically there's a return flow, and all of this is stitched across all these organizations. So customs basically doesn't charge double the duty. There's a very interactive and very good explanatory video of this use case on our website if anybody would want to see this in detail. But this is the basic objective. Now, looking at the business side of things, so if you take a short-term view of this, you would realize that the customs is actually giving up on their revenue, right? They had this thing that they could easily charge double the amount of duties on returned items. But the importance is being given to the bigger picture, where while giving up on some duties and tax right now, the bigger objective is to make Dubai a very attractive place for e-commerce businesses. And this makes Dubai a very attractive place for e-commerce businesses. It's probably the only jurisdiction that I'm aware of which has set up something like this for e-commerce companies, where they don't have to pay double the duties for returned items. So yeah, I don't want to go into the technical architecture. Basically, you understand, that an e-commerce company, the logistics company, and customs would have their blockchain nodes, and the information would be exchanged between these nodes for every item or every airway bill that is exchanged. And when it is returned, the same transaction, it is another block of this transaction. Another piece of information is getting added. That was the same airway bill number that got imported into the country 1 week ago, and now this is being exported. So the ledger has all the information available for these kind of transactions. Now, after doing this pilot, we've done this for DHL. Now we are doing a much bigger implementation of this for Dubai Customs, where they've now engaged three zones, three big e-commerce companies, including Amazon and Noon, and three big, logistics companies, including FedEx and UPS as well. So this is the architecture of that big e-commerce platform that we are putting together with different free zones, different logistics companies and all. So yeah, I don't want to go into the detail. You understand that the essence of the project, why this was done on blockchain, and what is the business problem you're solving here. Okay. Procure to pay is a very popular use case in blockchain. Procure to pay basically means, the three-way invoice matching, looking deeper into your supplier's supply chain, not having any surprises either by you or your supplier when delivery of goods is happening. So we've done a few implementations in this area. One of the implementations that we did was for Emirates Airline. There's another implementation. There are quite a few implementations, but one of the biggest implementations that we're doing right now is for Aramco as well, Saudi Aramco, and I'll cover that this presentation as well. So basically, we've got a procure to pay product, on our website that you can go and check the details of. So basically, Emirates gave us a very interesting problem. And this is before COVID. I mean, this is, I think, 2018, end of 2018, beginning of 2019. They said we want to solve we want you to solve a problem for us, which is the procurement of shoes for our ground staff and flight attendants. Apparently, if you have 22,000 flight attendants and shoes don't get ordered on time or delivered on time, it's apparently mayhem in Emirates, right? Their suppliers are Apparel Group over here, one of the companies over here, and the manufacturers is Hush Puppies. So all the ground staff, flight attendants, they wear Hush Puppies shoes in Emirates. And Emirates was struggling with this supplier because the shoes that were getting ordered were not getting delivered. The supplier would fulfill the order, but they would not deliver the right design, the right sizes. They would just fulfill the quantity, but those would be wrong shoes, that they wouldn't fulfill the demand. So they said, we want to streamline this, and we want to do entire supply chain management on blockchain involving our supplier, which is Hush Puppies, as well as the manufacturer, the manufacturer Hush Puppies, and supplier, which is the Apparel Group. But in doing this project, they also wanted to experiment with what blockchain can do for their procurement. And the objective was to roll this out to all the 2,500 other suppliers, including their catering suppliers and engineering suppliers and uniform suppliers and everyone else. So shoes being a low risk item was something that they could experiment with, right? Compared to, for example, engineering services or catering services. So basically, they've also had surprises in supplier selection. So a supplier's contract was getting expired, and somehow people forgot in Emirates, and they didn't onboard a new supplier. And onboarding a new supplier is a 6 months job, or 6 months long process in Emirates Airline, and that led to a lot of chaos and problems. So the first thing that they wanted to do was that they had their own systems, which is Waqas and Oracle. These are their procurement systems. The problems that they were facing was that they would always have a surprise from their supplier. The user function, which was ordering these supplies, didn't know whether their order would get delivered on time. One of the bigger problems that they also had was, and this is common across the board in a lot of organizations that do a lot of procurement, whenever the orders are delivered, the contracts, which are PDF scanned copies, or in some cases even physical documents, are somewhere stored in a locker, gathering dust, and nobody has the time to refer back to them to determine what are the penalties, rebates, warranties, all these things, right? So these are static documents which are not functional as day-to-day transactions, right? So this was another problem that we wanted to solve. And then contracting department also works in silos. They don't necessarily work with the operations department and the procurement department. So this is the solution that we built for them. Basically, the objective was, without going into a lot of detail, when Hush Puppies has this particular order that Emirates has placed with them on their assembly line on February 15th, or on their quality control line on February 15th in their factory in Spain, only then Emirates would be sure that I would receive this order on, say, April 20th. This is how far back they wanted to look into their supplier and their manufacturer's supply chain, which means their supplier as well as their manufacturer and their ERP systems events had to be stamped on the blockchain as well. So this was one thing that we achieved. We integrated with Hush Puppies, and we integrated with Apparel Group's ERP systems and the logistics company, and so on and so forth. And then we have self-executing smart contracts, which means as and when a delivery was made to Emirates Airline, they would immediately, the system would automatically calculate what is the rebate that has to be paid, what are the penalties that need to be applied, if this thing is in the warranty or not, if was this a returned item or not. So all of this would automatically happen. And since the supplier and the manufacturer were looking at the shared ledger, there was no room for any disputes. So because this data was coming from their system, every event of the supply chain was happening on the shared ledger. So when Emirates would go back and say, your payable or your receivable for this delivery is, say, 1.5 million dirhams, and I've calculated the rebates and the warranties and penalties and everything else, there was no way for the supplier to dispute this. So this is one thing that they achieved. And then obviously Emirates had complete visibility across all stages of supply chain. So this is something that they had, they had 360 unified view of all the things. That did a lot of details in this project that if somebody is interested, I can take offline with them. But we've done procure to pay implementations in manufacturing. There's an aircraft manufacturing outfit here called Strata Global in UAE. They wanted to set up 3D manufacturing plant. They have a 3D, they have a manufacturing plant for producing the internal parts of the aircraft. So Etihad Airways and Boeing and Airbus are their customers. They wanted to set up a 3D printing unit. And when you're manufacturing aircraft parts with 3D grain, the provenance of the grain is very important. Where was it sourced? Where was it stored? What temperatures were it stored? So they had to provide all this provenance information to the airlines or the buyer. So this is a project that we did for that. Yeah, I'll skip the details. In the oil and gas sector, we've done something for ADNOC, where we gave them real-time visibility and view of different readings coming from different opcos. So they have 18, 19 opcos. ADNOC, which is Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, the oil producer of UAE, basically. So they wanted to set up a network where they wanted to track different values of volume. Flare is generally the wastage that happens, when you're refining or manufacturing, hydrocarbon projects or products. So they wanted to track these details across 18, 19 different opcos. So every opco would use their own ERP system. There wasn't a centralized system. So this was a project that was done. This was a sustainability project because eventually ADNOC wanted that, they could present this or have the global environmental agencies plug into this blockchain-based network and claim that whatever, carbon footprint ADNOC is showing on their papers is actually, ground reality. So we're not making up or fudging numbers. So this was more of a statement that ADNOC wanted to put forward. Aramco, we are doing again a procure to pay implementation for them. So think of the use case that I've shown you for Emirates Airline, but in the context of oil and gas. So Aramco obviously has suppliers as well who are supplying them different materials and engineering equipment and services. And Aramco wanted a invoice verification platform or a procure to pay platform with these suppliers and manufacturers, and we're helping them put this together across multiple suppliers. And they have this kind of real-time visibility of what their suppliers are manufacturing, what they're producing, how much do they need to pay them, so on and so forth. I will take a pause here. How much time do we have left?
I think we have about half an hour.
Okay.
And depending on how much time you have, we could possibly go higher, because I think what you're doing is something that has not been done in this class so far. And I think it's very, very important. So I think the way that you sort of walked us through the multiple use cases, and which is the reason why I wanted you to come and speak, because I remember your Cypher presentation and the presentations before that at the other Picto Awards. My take is that the kind of insights and exposure you would share, I don't think anybody can do that. So we have time, as
Thank you.
much time as you have. As it's, again, up to you. It's a weekend. It's your holiday. It's 8 o'clock. So आपके हाथ में सब कुछ. You tell.
No, I just want to make sure that people are not getting bored or if there's interest. I have 4 or 5 other use cases, because like I said, we've covered financial regulation and supervision, where we did the E-KYC and the trade finance and those kind of use cases. Then we did some supply chain use cases. This is the final leg. This is digital government and transformation and smart cities, and these are generally more interesting use cases, everyday use cases that we can relate to better, regardless which industry we come from. That is why I kept these at the end, that even if somebody is like dead bored, they have something interesting to look at. Okay.
No, we're not bored. We're not bored. You have as much time as you want. No issues at all.
I think we should be
Thank
able
you.
to wrap 30 minutes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so this is the first use case that I'd like to discuss. This is a platform that we had built, by the way, before the pandemic for Dubai Health Authority. This was an Expo 2020 initiative. Now, the objective was to build a platform that would get real-time information of equipment availability, critical medical equipment availability for emergency and trauma patients, and also do a matching with the footfall of medical emergency patients, in hospitals. So we wanted to set up a first of a kind nerve center where the health authority could see citywide analytics, not of normal patients, not of fever and flu patients, but actual trauma patients. Why we wanted to build this in Dubai is because, or why Dubai Health Authority wanted to build this was because when Expo was happening, we were expecting 25 to 30 million people visiting Dubai over a span of 6 months. Now, Dubai could not have built a couple of dozen hospitals just for those 6 months. So what they wanted to do was to optimize the collaboration and coordination between the emergency rooms across all private and government hospitals, so that they operate as one big emergency room. The other objective was to facilitate paramedics. So imagine if there's a apartment block fire or a road accident, and the paramedics pick up somebody from that accident location. This system would tell them where to take this patient, where this patient's life could be saved. So the closest hospital may be 2 minutes down the road, but that hospital is not going to save this person's life because this person is a burn victim and they have head injuries. And the hospital that is 2 minutes down the road does not have burn beds. But the hospital that is 10 minutes down the road or 15 minutes down the road has burn beds and has the capability to treat head injuries as well. So this was the kind of insights, real-time insights we wanted to derive from hospitals and pass them on to the paramedics and have this kind of a view available to Dubai Health Authority so that they have eyes and ears on the whole city. So these blue balloons are basically hospitals, and every hospital's availability of equipment is stated over here. So this Meteor Hospital in real time, we know has 4 emergency beds, 2 CCU beds, 1 ICU bed, and no PICU bed, and 2 burn beds available, right? Similarly, the ambulances that are going around, there's a reason why this ambulance is red, because it has somebody with a serious condition or an emergency trauma patient, and it is supposed to, reach this hospital. This is the ETA, this is the incident, identification, and this is over here is yellow because this is probably not taking a patient, this ambulance. So there's a lot of, indication of what's happening with different ambulances on this as well. We wanted to tap into civil defense cameras because we wanted Dubai Health Authority to have eyes and ears of ground zero, what is happening. We were not able to do that, because civil defense did not give permission, and DHA was sorting things out with them when COVID happened, basically. So this is basically the system. These are the kind of views. So this shows you that there are 60% emergency beds occupied in the whole city, 57 CCU beds occupied, ICU beds, and then this is a breakdown of these equipment across different hospitals. On the right-hand side, you have the patient footfall. You have how many P1, P2, P3 category patients are coming in, and then among them, how many are burn victims, cardiac patients, so on and so forth. So again, going back to the actual objective of this project, the objective was for the Dubai Health Authority and all the hospitals to collaborate and share resources if you have, a big spike of patients coming in. And this was obviously also seen as a project that would make the city ready for a natural disaster or a pandemic. A part of this application was used for COVID as well, so for ventilators tracking, this was used, but we were in the middle of this implementation when COVID started and the application was sort of half cooked. So, and then, there wasn't time. But part of it was actually used. Why was this done on blockchain? Again, decentralized data coming from different hospitals. And there's a smart contract. So there's a layer of referrals in this platform as well. So there's a contract between government hospitals and private hospitals over here that if a private hospital is not able to service a certain condition or patient, they can transfer this patient to another hospital, which is a specialty government hospital. So for example, Latifa Hospital over here is the best facility in terms of child delivery cases. Now, if a private hospital is not able to handle a case or there's some complication, they can call up Latifa Hospital and say, we're referring this patient to you, you need to step in and take charge. What happens is that at times government hospitals are not as forthcoming in receiving such cases, which is against the law, by the way. I mean, they could really get into trouble. But these things do happen. That is why DHA wanted to ensure that these referrals is a smart contract between private hospitals and the government hospitals. And if a request has been raised by a private hospital of such nature, it is stored on the blockchain. And the government hospital has to respond. Even if they say that, no, we are full capacity or whatever, they have to make sure that the response is on the blockchain as well, so that tomorrow, in case of an audit or whatever, they can basically say that, this is the reason why we did not accept this patient. So there's a referral layer to it. And then there's obviously data coming from multiple sources. We didn't want to store it in a centralized repository. It's a fluid data. It keeps on changing. So that is why it was done on blockchain. Okay, then this is another pilot. This is one of the projects which is not so far, whatever I've explained.
Waqas, one quick question on the health one.
Sure.
If you say, let's say if you have a certain number of facilities and a certain number of vehicles, a certain number of incidences, were you able to get your response time on the blockchain, or were you still using an off-chain version on the site to get updated data? How did that work?
Yeah, so basically we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of equipment, we're talking about thousands of equipment. So in this case, the result that the paramedics would see would be from blockchain. It wasn't from an off-chain database. I mean, here we did not have the performance issue of getting data from blockchain because the volume was not that big.
So from a throughput point of view, where's the threshold? As in, at what level of record or performance or response time do you need to go off chain, and at what level you can actually do it on the blockchain?
So if you're looking at transaction by transaction data, or you're fetching data for a particular equipment or if for a particular state, it can be fetched from blockchain. It doesn't take that long. When you're fetching bulk data, when you're fetching, a from to date filter, and you're fetching, thousands of records in one go, that's where blockchain doesn't work. So these dashboards that you see over here, they're not built on blockchain. They are built on the off-chain database. But the equipment availability that we relay to the paramedic or to anybody, that goes from blockchain directly, because that is one equipment that this person based on the initial triage that the paramedic has done, or the diagnosis that they've done, they figured out this is a cardiac patient. Now they want to know, where do we have cardiac facility in the city, and the relevant equipment. Now this data is not bulk data. This can come from blockchain. But this data that you see on this dashboard right now is bulk data, so that is why we bring it through off-chain databases.
No, but my question is, for example, if you have a cardiac case and you want to say, Kiji, how many CC units I have, and let's say I have 15 hospitals, and they each have, let's say, 2 beds, and you want to see what's the availability of an available bed in the nearest possible region, then you're saying that 15 hospitals times 2 beds is about 30 records, and that's not a problem.
That's not a problem at all.
But if you said that I'm looking for, let's say, um, um, a trauma unit, right? And let's say I have 30 hospitals and I have 10 beds and I have 300, that's also not a problem.
Yeah. I mean, when you, unless you go into thousands, you may have a problem. But these things are also improving, even the performance has been improving. But when you're dealing with hundreds of records, it's not a problem to fetch data directly from blockchain. It doesn't take that long.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next pilot that we did in 2020's Arab Health conference in UAE was for Ministry of Health. This project never saw the light of day, because right after, I think Arab Health was in January or February, and then we went into lockdown March onwards. So after the pilot was delivered, we never got this project. But this is a neat concept. Basically, we have different regulators of hospitals over here. So Dubai Health Authority is one, Dubai Healthcare City is another. Then you've got other regulators in different emirates over here. There's no unified record of healthcare professionals. Doctors, paramedic staff, nurses. So Ministry of Health, which is a federal entity, wanted to set up a national healthcare professional registry where the accreditations, qualifications, and all the other profile of these medical workers is part of this network, and the relevant health authorities and hospitals keep on updating these records. The reason why they did this, and this is something they told us, that there have been cases where a healthcare professional who has been dismembered from one jurisdiction was able to work in another, So somebody was, I don't know whether it was a malpractice case or it was a case of misdeclaration of their, accreditations or certifications. They were let go from one hospital, but they were able to apply in another hospital, in another licensing authority, or in another emirate. And there was no way for them to figure out, that this person has been dismembered from somewhere else. So this was one major driver of this project, this particular loophole. But again, this is a very good national asset to have, where you have your healthcare professionals registry. And again, like I've been saying, this is a national strategic asset. You don't put this in a centralized repository, especially if the stakeholders are multiple organizations and multiple entities. You give them their blockchain nodes, they stamp their data on it, they keep updating their data on it as and when they hire somebody. And the central entity, which is the Ministry of Health, has a super view of everything else, but these different jurisdictions have their own view. So this was the concept. We delivered a pilot or a POC for this, but then, we really didn't go ahead with this. Okay, this is an interesting project. Again, in line with the paperless vision of the city, we are an expat city, which means major population lives on rent over here. So when you're doing these kind of projects, if you want to make your city paperless, so the use cases that you pick up basically are the use cases, the first few use cases that you pick up are the use cases that impact the most amount of lives. And property leasing or tenancy contracts is one of those processes which does touch many lives, because a lot of people rent property over here instead of owning property here. Now, the tenancy contract process, whether you're doing it for the first time or you're renewing your tenancy contract, a tenancy contract is 1 year long over here. So the first process is that you have to sign the tenancy contract between the tenant and the landlord. So this is the first piece of paper that you sign. Then you have to issue either 4 or 6 or 2 checks to the landlord or the property management company from whom you're renting. So this is the second piece of paper. Then you have to take this tenancy contract to the land department, because the land department has to certify this tenancy contract. They need this tenancy contract needs to be in their knowledge. This process is called Ijari over here. So you get an Ijari certificate where the land department says that yes, I've acknowledged and updated my records for this tenancy contract. And these things have implications. It's not just that they want knowledge of this. So family residence visas are tied up with the tenancy contracts. So there are rules over here. So for example, if you have, I don't know, 4 family members, you can't be living in a studio apartment. If you have, large amount of family members, you have to be living in a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment. I don't know the exact size of this, but based on what kind of accommodation you have, the family residence visas are sort of issued by the government. So there's a correlation between the kind of property that you're leasing. So when you go and sponsor your family's residence visa or get your family's residence visa, they want your tenancy contract, and they want to look at it. The immigration authority wants to look at it. So the second process, after signing the tenancy contract and issuing the checks, you get your Ijari done, which is the certification by the land department. The fourth step that you have to do is you have to go to the electric and water authority along with your Emirates ID and passport and your tenancy contract and your Ijari certificate, and tell them to switch on the electricity in that unit and start billing you. So the bill has to come in your name, right? So this is the fourth step. And the fifth step is you obviously go to your telco and like eat the salat or do, and you get your internet or entertainment package at home. What we've done through this project is we've enabled people to do all of this within 5 minutes sitting in their homes and offices. So basically what happens is that all these entities have a blockchain node, and we stitch this inter-organization workflow through smart contracts. So this was done with Waqas Properties. Waqas Properties is one of the biggest property management companies of Dubai. They have the most amount of rental units available. So when somebody goes to the website of Waqas Properties, they select the apartment or the villa they want to rent, or they want to renew their existing tenancy contract. The journey starts from there. And then we stitch the journey across all these entities. So automatically, when Waqas Properties digitally signs the tenancy contract, Emirates NBD has a digital check product or direct debit product. We use those 2 products to give the direct debit instructions. Direct debit is like an SI instruction, so it's an equivalent of a digital check. So the bank gets involved and the checks are issued in the name of Waqas, which is the property management company. After doing this, Waqas Property passes on this information to the land department saying, hey, this is a valid tenancy contract that I'm passing on to you digitally. Can you issue your Ijari? And land department obviously is receiving this information from a trusted source, a participant node on the blockchain network. They issue the Ijari certificate, and then we go to DIVA, which is the Electric and Water Authority, and the bill is issued in the person's name, and whatever fee has to be distributed is distributed among all these parties. So this is how this entire tenancy contract process has been made paperless, where earlier a tenant would have to drive in 45 degrees heat to 3, 4, 5 government entities and locations. Now everything is done digitally. Okay, lost passport certificate journey. This is another Expo 2020 project which has gone live, but the main objective, main driver behind this project was Expo 2020. If you lose your passport, again, a lot of us are expats in this country, which means passport is one of the most important documents that we carry. So again, this is a very Dubai specific or expat country or city specific use case. Now, when you lose your passport in Dubai, it's as good as shooting you, because the pain that you go through after that is immense. So when you lose your passport and you go to Dubai police and say, hey, I want a lost passport certificate, because your embassy or your consulate will only issue you a new passport when you have a certificate from Dubai police. Dubai police will tell you when you go to them that first go to Dubai courts and get me an NOC from them. Because how do I know that your passport is not confiscated by the courts and you're trying to get another passport to escape from the country? So you go to Dubai courts. When you go to Dubai courts, they'll tell you, no, first go to Dubai public prosecution, because how do we know that there's a case against you which has not been filed at the court? So first get me an NOC from public prosecution. When you go to public prosecution, they say, okay, so you're a resident, first go to the GDRFA, which is the immigration authority, and get me a certificate from them stating that you are a resident of this city. What we've done is we've digitized this entire process across all these government entities. So you go to Dubai Police's mobile app, you apply for a lost passport certificate, and within 10 minutes, you receive your certificate. The reason why this was being done for Expo is, again, if you're expecting 25, or Dubai was at least expecting 25 to 30 million people, you're expecting a lot of these people will lose their passports. They're here for a trade show, they will be reckless, at least the percentage would be higher. And we didn't want them going door to door to different government entities. This is a frustrating experience, brings bad name to the city. So that is why this process was done. So this is the current state. Now this is the past state. We're live with this application. So, you report this incident to police, then courts would have to issue an NOC, public prosecution, GDRFA, and then the issue would be, and there were 7 steps, and all these entities would also charge, by the way, their own fee. What we've done now is that we've stitched this across all these entities through smart contracts, where the experience is completely digital across all these entities. And the customer doesn't leave Dubai Police's mobile app. That's the only front end basically that they use. And then the fee is distributed across all these entities. So we charge the customer upfront, and then the share is, again, that's another smart contract between all these entities. Once we've collected the fund from Dubai Police, it is then passed on to all the entities for the different NOCs that they're generating. So this is another use case. Dubai Knowledge Blockchain, DKB, is another use case. Education records on blockchain also is a very popular use case, blockchain use case. What Dubai wanted to do, and it's a no-brainer. I mean, all of us have to carry our transcripts in paper. We have to maintain them. So basically, the objective of Dubai Knowledge Blockchain is that any school-going kid over here, their academic and non-academic qualification, accreditation certificates are digitally available by the school, and then it can be shared with another school when the kids transfers from one school to another, right? So based on customers' consent or parents' consent in this case, this information can be digitally exchanged between different schools, so that parents don't necessarily have to carry paper transcripts and paper accreditations of their kids. And the eventual objective is that DKB, which is Dubai Knowledge Blockchain, will eventually be opened up to international universities, so that if a kid has done their high school from Dubai and they're applying overseas in a university or a college, that university and college can tap into Dubai Knowledge Blockchain and fetch all academic and non-academic achievements of this kid, starting from kindergarten all the way to high school. So that's the objective. This leg of international, sort of alignment will happen in some time. We've not done that for now. But KHDA schools, KHDA is Knowledge and Human Development Authority of Dubai. They're the regulators of school. KHDA schools will have this platform to share students' information. Soon, I think we'll be going live third quarter of this year with this platform. Crowd donation platform is something that we are doing for the regulator of charities over here. Charities and zakat collection, there are quite a few loopholes in this area in a lot of countries. And the regulator of charities and zakat is called ICAD. The department is called ICAD. Basically, the objective is to set up a platform where the charities can register their causes, the KYC of the donors and the charities happen. The charities can raise campaigns and projects and pitch their projects. And the donors, when they have to pay for their zakat or they have to, donate anything, they can look at the different causes, look at the progress made in different causes, and then donate as per their own preference. So if somebody, has education very close to their heart, they'd like to donate towards education. Somebody may have healthcare, somebody may want to donate something towards refugees, so different causes classified according to different, classifications are available. People can look at it. People can also track the performance of the charity, and see how many projects they've done in the past, how many causes they've fulfilled. So think of it like booking.com, ratings and reviews and all of that, jazz in the platform. So the objective is very simple. You browse by different categories. Could be, construction of a mosque, could be for primary education services, refugee support. You discover the details as a donor, and then you pay. This is entire, very transparent across the regulator, the charities, and the causes. The charities or anybody who's championing a cause has the option to post updates. So, for example, if they're constructing a mosque, they can put pictures of the construction and the progress or whatever. And then, their funding targets that are achieved or can be achieved, or, these things are also put out there. So think of it as a marketplace. So this is what I was mentioning, that these are the profiles of different people who've been donating or people who've been raising funds. How many campaigns have they launched? How many have they, fulfilled? So on and so forth. So again, this is something under construction right now. We were not completely done with it, so I don't have actual application screenshots. These are just, concept screen that we've built for ICAD. This project, I think we will be able to go live with somewhere, I think end of this year or Q1 next year. So yeah, this is it. I am done.
Thank you so much, Waqas. This was such a phenomenal presentation. I think when I agreed to teach this course, when it came to blockchain, I think yours was the first name that came to my mind. I said, okay, I'll have to talk to you and figure out some way of getting you to come to the class and talk to the students so they get a sense of के आप क्या कर रहे हैं और दुनिया में क्या काम हो रहा है. एक मेरा सवाल है, I think, and this is a question that everybody has in their mind. इसकी जो आपने सारी अच्छी अच्छी चीजें में बताई हैं, इसमें से कुछ यहाँ पे भी हो रहा है, हमारे मुल्क में भी कुछ चल रहा है. Is there any hope of seeing this here in this part of the world?
There are two initiatives that there are three initiatives actually. एक वो है जो होके बंद हो गया है. There was a project that we have done for SAGP. SAGP is Sindh Agricultural Growth Project. उनका एक टेंडर आया था, वर्ल्ड बैंक फंडेड प्रोजेक्ट था, and they wanted to basically bridge the gap between the facilities that are available under this program to small farmers. So basically होता ये है कि SAGP का जो प्रोग्राम है या वर्ल्ड बैंक जब इस तरह के प्रोग्राम्स करता है तो बहुत बड़ी सब्सिडी देते हैं वो बहुत सारे एग्रीकल्चरल इक्विपमेंट के ऊपर. Now this equipment could range from tractors all the way to moisture absorbing sheets, which are very important. I've been told for red chilies, for example. So 70% सब्सिडी देता है वर्ल्ड बैंक इसके ऊपर या गवर्नमेंट ऑफ सिंध, और 30% जो है वो फार्मर को पे करना पड़ता है. और इसके अंदर obviously there's a lot of pilferage involved in this, and then these facilities are normally taken up by big farmers rather than small farmers. So we were asked to set up a platform where this is transparently done, where there's a marketplace of suppliers who are supplying this, and then farmers based on their NICs and everything are applying for this equipment, and what is allocated to whom is part of blockchain. We had done this project. It was a pilot, I think 6 months project. Microsoft Azure ke upar hua tha. Microsoft was also part of this. And then I think SAGP could not seek further funding from this for this project. So we were paid for the pilot, but I think they were, I don't know, they've still put a case forward to the Sindh government or to World Bank. But this is something that has already happened, and it was production grade, by the way. It was not a POC. We had actual farmers, actual thing, but then they did not have funds to continue with it because hamara to kaam ho gaya tha. But since this was sort of deployed on Microsoft Azure, they had to have a monthly subscription, and it wasn't big. It was like $500,000 a month or something. So, but I know that this project has been shelved for now, at least. The other two initiatives that I'm working on is one is with Raza Bakir and SBP. So we're doing a national E-KYC for Pakistan. There has been a blessing given by the Governor Saab. PBA, which is Pakistan Bankers Association, have put together a task force, and there are 3 participating banks with whom we are starting a POC of the national E-KYC. So that is what's happening. And the other thing that I'm aware of, which I've been looped in, is the Naya Pakistan Housing Program. there the entire allotment, फर्स्ट इवैल्यूएशन किनको घर देने हैं, कौन लोग हैं वो जिनको घर देने हैं, उसका पूरा एलिजिबिलिटी क्राइटेरिया, उसके बाद फिर जब घर मिल जाता है तो उसके मॉर्गेज की पूरी लाइफ साइकिल, all of that has to be on blockchain. I've been working very closely with Bank Al Falah and Habib Bank because these are the two banks I think who are providing financing for Naya Pakistan Housing Program. So, and since it is the flagship program of this government, transparency is absolutely essential in this, and blockchain provides a very good vehicle. So these are two talks that are happening, but so far abhi kuch ground pe nahi hua.
No, that's really good news, and I think the E-KYC one is the one that's closest to my heart, because I think as people who work in and outside of Pakistan, I think that's something that we face almost on a daily basis, and it just makes zero sense at all to not have a centralized KYC facility. You have ECIB, why can't you have E-KYC? Achha,
No,
I think I have
the
asked enough
kind of,
question.
sorry,
Ji, go ahead.
the kind of message this sends to the world. I mean, I've been really chasing because banking institutions are, I mean, no matter which way you look at it, they are one of the most organized sort of industry that we have. And I want a blockchain story coming out of Pakistan because it sends out a very good message. And a lot of your FATF problems get solved by a national E-KYC and AML platform. And if Pakistan goes out internationally and says our KYC and AML is done on blockchain with zero tampering and immutability, I think that's a very strong political message as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think I've asked enough questions. I'm going to ask or leave an opportunity for my students to ask questions also. So Alishma, Mariam, Midhat, Arbaz, Zara, Ifra, do you have any questions for Waqas? Waqas is, now that you've seen him in action, you know that you're not going to get this resource.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. I have a question. So, sir, can you tell us more about anti-money laundering or food security as a use case of blockchain technology? Or how we can apply that thing more precisely in Pakistan or in any other state?
I'll address food security first. So food security, there have been some attempts done in different parts of the world where critical food equipment, especially like infant baby milk and all of those things, right from the farm to the shelf, uski ek provenance ke projects हुए हैं. IBM has done something with Walmart. उसकी दो चीजें होती हैं. एक तो ये होता है कि कुछ products ऐसे होते हैं जैसा for example poultry. So when you have a disease in any produce, typically what happens is that you have to get rid of the entire lot of that produce, right? China से जो for example poultry product या कोई भी product आ रहा है या UAE के अंदर यहाँ पे ऑस्ट्रेलिया से beef आता है या कुछ आता है, so if they say that there's been some disease found in Australia, they have to waste the entire lot of anything that has come from Australia, say in the past 15 or 20 days. So the one aspect is that if you have exact lot tracking, that no, this disease was found in this farm with this particular herd or this cattle, and you have that tracking up until the product that you have on your shelf, you only get rid of the materials that are related to that disease. So that is one side of it. The other side of it is obviously for certain counterfeit purposes. There are a lot of products that now have different means of you tracking or even the manufacturer tracking कि ये अगर for example Carrefour के shelf के ऊपर ये baby infant milk पड़ा हुआ है तो इसको यहाँ पे अभी होना चाहिए था कि नहीं होना चाहिए था, ये manufacturer और supplier की supply chain में भी यहीं पे है कि नहीं है. अगर ये यहाँ पे नहीं होना चाहिए था इसका मतलब है कि ये counterfeit product है, ये actual Nestle का product या Unilever का product नहीं है for example. So इन areas के ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा काम हो रहा है food provenance के ऊपर और tracking of food products के ऊपर. The complexity in these products is that, and this is generally a complexity with all blockchain projects, lobbying between all the stakeholders who are part of the supply chain is not necessarily easy, especially if that supply chain is international. Local supply chain mein ye ho sakta hai, we are doing a project for Carrefour currently, where we are tying up with local poultry farms to get the provenance of poultry products for the chicken that is available in Carrefour. But even Carrefour can't or is not able to do this internationally. So So this is one area which can be done. I think it can be done in Pakistan as well. If you have some big manufacturers of products which have huge, risk of disease or whatever, you can, set this network with them and with some retailers, and it's a very sort of comforting message to the customer, that the product that you're using has end-to-end provenance of its supply chain. So this was my answer to your food. This thing AML के अंदर यही है कि once you have KYC is the first step of AML. So once you have your KYC in place, you know who's who, and you start putting two and two together. Then you bring in the transactional data, because KYC के अंदर transactions data नहीं होता, वो सिर्फ customer का, चाहे वो individual है या corporate है, उसका data होता है. Once you figured this out and you figured out your benami accounts, you figured out कि नहीं ये इस आदमी का ये account नहीं हो सकता या ये, then you add transactions layer to it, and then you come up with your AML insights basically. So KYC is a building block to figure out AML frauds, in my opinion.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Zara, Medat, Mariam? Jirbaz, go ahead. Jirbaz, go ahead.
Okay, so sir, I just question, like, if blockchain technology makes life and businesses so easy, why isn't it a mainstream idea? Like, why isn't every other organization implementing it?
Let me see how I can answer this question. First, blockchain is not a solution to every problem. A problem has to be qualified to be a blockchain problem. But the biggest reason why it has not become as mainstream is because it's a multi-organization play. Organizations do not necessarily sit across the table, especially competing organizations or industry peers do not sit across the table to solve a problem and then follow through. This is the reason why you see a lot of adoption of blockchain in countries like UAE and now Bahrain, Saudi is following suit. हमारे लिए आसानी यहाँ पे ये होती है कि all of these use cases are championed by a regulator or a government entity, and we live in a kingdom. So it's easier for the regulator to slam an agenda on the table and say everybody has to follow. West में problem ये हो रही है कि if you're expecting JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs to sit across the table and solve a problem, or you're expecting 2 shipping lines or 3 shipping lines to sit across the table and solve the problem, they have competing agendas. They have, these organizations work at different pace and they don't necessarily get along. So a lot of failed use cases that I've seen in Europe and some in North America, this has been the reason. The championing entity wasn't either available or wasn't there, or there wasn't any championing entity. It was just peers working together. So this for me has been one of the biggest in all the use cases that I've studied, has been one of the main reasons why blockchain adoption is sort of struggling a bit.
I understand. So there are limitations of blockchain as well.
It's not technology limitation, it's limitations of participating, because these are not single organization implementations. These are multi-organization implementations, and so it's difficult to follow through, if you don't have a strong or influential championing entity.
I understand. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
Zara, go ahead. Zara, go ahead. Ask the question.
Sir, is there any link between investor relations and blockchain, or can we somehow link these together?
I'm trying to think of use cases. Off top of my head, I can't. Transparency, yeah, we can see some angle around transparency, but yeah, so far I've not come across any use case in this space on blockchain. I'll do a little bit of more research. I've never thought about it myself, but I can figure out or look around.
Ji, Mariam, go ahead. Mariam, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, I was thinking about you covered a lot of areas like government hospitals and private hospitals, and I was thinking about if you have come across using KYC के बारे में, Have you come across blockchain usage in the insurance industry particularly? Can you use KYC about different insurance? Basically, जब हम लोग insurance करते हैं तो there's your customer, there's hospital, and I'm talking insurance specifically for the medical purposes for hospital insurance. If we when we go normally to a hospital and we claim our insurance. So there is just three parties involved: your insurance company, hospital, and the customer. And if you get approved of the insurance, you get refunds, and if you don't get refunds. My question is, can you use the KYC to connect the multiple insurance company, you can say, for reinsuring the customers or something like this?
Yes,
And can you
this
use
is a
blockchain
brilliant
for
use
that?
case. Yeah, this is a brilliant use case, and I know of certain insurance companies, large insurance groups, who are exploring this. A variant of this was also being discussed with this National Insurance Authority, so the regulator of all the insurance companies over here, whether it's health or motor or any other kind of insurance in UAE. The federal entity for that is National Insurance Authority. So they wanted to set up a network of all the insurers. There were two objectives of that. One was they wanted to track the performance of all the insurance and make sure that the claims and all these things are straightforward and there are no issues happening there. So they wanted to bring all the insurance providers under a blockchain network. So that was a national initiative. So they had a different view on this. But even within an insurance company, between them and their network of hospitals that are on their panel, this is a very good play where there's complete transparency between the customer, the insured person, the hospital, and the insurer. So there's this three-way matching. It's a no-brainer. The only challenge is that will an insurance company have enough influence on the hospitals to join this kind of a platform? And my answer is maybe not, unless this insurance company is the biggest player in the market. They may not have that kind of influence. So it will be left at the discretion of the hospitals whether they want to join this kind of a network or not. But as a use case, it makes perfect sense. It brings complete transparency.
So I think एक जो वकास इसमें application which is of mutual interest on both sides is जो आपने, so if you go through the use cases that you walked through, I think तीन themes हैं जो बहुत common है in health insurance claim processing. एक is reconciliation, so you simplify the reconciliation piece completely, right? एक is payment processing. तो अगर आप हॉस्पिटल का इंसेंटिव देखें तो रिकॉन साइड से एंड पेमेंट प्रोसेसिंग साइड से इट मेक्स अ लॉट ऑफ सेंस फॉर देम. फॉर बोथ द हॉस्पिटल एंड द इंश्योरेंस कंपनी द अप्रूवल टाइम कट डाउन, राइट? कि आपको जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल मुझे एमआरआई कराना है तो आई गो टू AKU एंड ऐसे कि जी मेरा आप एमआरआई कर दें एंड इट्स कवर्ड इन द इंश्योरेंस. तो पहले वो जो नंबर है पूछेंगे आपके इंश्योरेंस कंपनी कौन है, फिर जो उसका नंबर है उसको फ़ोन करेंगे, फिर वहाँ पे जो डॉक्टर है वो उसको evaluate करेगा. He may say yes or no. I may have actually spoken to my relationship manager and may have gotten a pre-approval. I may give that pre-approval number to them. So there are like lots of steps in the process, which you could completely simplify. So my take would be, if, from the incentive point of view for the hospital, the primary incentive is faster payment processing and approvals and reconciliation of both the payments as well as procedures. Same thing true for the insurance company. But I think for both of them, the use case, the user experience, the customer experience for the person who's actually getting the procedure done, that would improve phenomenally.
Absolutely, and yeah, and there's no, like you said, there's no operational overhead. You set up this network, and even if you have, it doesn't really matter what volumes you're working with. So if you have this kind of a setup, your operational overhead of reconciliations and everything simply goes away. Because again, the hospital, the customer, and the insurance company are looking at the same shared ledger. There is no reconciliation required then.
All right, G. So I think with that, I'm going to let you go because I know this is a Friday. It's your off day. I'm really, really grateful that you took out the time and you took so much, shared so much knowledge and wisdom and insights with my students. I think I speak for all of them, not just for them, for also for myself. I think मेरा भी जो अच्छा खासा refresher. जब भी I see you present, my my blockchain concepts get revised, reviewed, and refreshed. एक I think चीज है which is you haven't done that, and I wanted you to speak a bit about. Um, we saw a lot of cipher. in your use cases. Could you say a few words about Cypher and where Cypher's come from and where Cypher's going and what Cypher is?
Okay, I deliberately stayed away from it because I knew I was talking to finance people, and Cypher is plain engineering. That's just computer science. So basically, Avanza, we like to create IP, right? So we like to create products. So even during the past 20 years, we've created, an ATM controller, a middleware, so we are a product company. So when I was entering in the blockchain space 3 years ago, I was very clear that I wanted to have an IP play around blockchain as well. And I was not interested in coming up with my own blockchain platform. So coming up with my own Hyperledger Fabric or coming up with my own Quorum. I didn't want to do that. I don't have Stanford and MIT graduates working for me. B, that's not the commercial space I wanted to be in. So we found a gap in the market, and we could foresee that 3, 4, 5 years down the road, an organization would be launching multiple blockchain use cases. So they may be championing a few use cases, or they may be participating in some networks which are regional, local, or international, where they'll have to host a blockchain node. So we came up with a concept of a product called Cypher, which is a blockchain orchestration and governance layer. So think of it as a middleware of blockchains, where you have a bunch of adapters which abstract your ERP systems with the underlying blockchain platform. So you have basically SAP running in an organization. For example, the project that we're doing for Aramco, they have SAP running. Now SAP needs to talk to Hyperledger Fabric. So you have a ready-made adapter to do that. So we have all these adapters. Then we have a bunch of microservices which are required in any blockchain implementation for governance, for event handling, for reporting. So we've made those as part of our arsenal in Cypher. And the advantage that we get is that compared to any other organization, we implement a blockchain project in 1/4 the time, because there's so much ready-made components that are available. So my engineers don't necessarily have to write a lot of fresh code to implement a new use case. So this entire platform is called Cypher. There's this interactive video as well as a lot of material available on our website as well. And if somebody has interest, I can do a offline discussion with them as well. But also, again, in blockchain, we have an IP play, and all these implementations that I've discussed with you are built on Cypher.
So Waqas, I think एक सवाल जो आपने पहले भी answer किया था, but I think this has come back again. And I think the question that the student specifically wants to ask is कि you're aware of the fact कि 2 या 3 implementations चल रही हैं, but from your perspective, from your point of view, when or where do you see projects like these? जैसे आपने trade finance बताया, government services बताया, payment services बताया, centralized reporting बताया, hospital services बताया. When do you see projects like these being implemented and taking off in Pakistan? As in technology wise, so there is no issue. Education wise, awareness wise, vision wise, there might be some questions. But do you see these happening in the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What's your timeline and outlook on that?
I don't want to go there, but there's no technical answer for this. See,
you don't have to hang yourself. You don't have to hang yourself. You can say I take the 5th, and that's fine.
See, innovation doesn't happen by accident. There's a lot of preliminary work that goes before innovation happens. So governments that are embracing fourth industrial revolution right now, they have a certain base fitness level of e-governance, or their systems are in place. So now they're taking that next leap and adopting the blockchains and the AIs and big datas. The other thing that's happened is this culture of innovation that has been instilled. So हमारे यहाँ UAE के अंदर या दुबई के अंदर क्या होता है कि government entities, or the DG, the Director General of a government entity, is not rewarded or recognized on the basis of their revenue. That is a given. That is something they have to do. That's how they have been hired. That's why they've been hired. The only award that the leadership gives to an organization publicly, or the ruler of the city gives, or the country gives to the entity, is innovation awards. Those are the only awards. So there's this healthy race of competition between these government entities, which lead them to do these kind of projects. So there's a whole mindset change that has happened over the past, 10, 15, 20 years, which has, told everybody that it's innovation that is going to take you forward. So doing blockchain projects and AI projects and big data projects and embracing fourth industrial revolution is just an outcome. Pakistan, the good thing that I'm seeing is there's some fundamentals that are being put in place right now. But there's some very smart people who've taken on good roles in good organizations such as SECP, NITB. I'm very good friends with Usman in Nadra. I know he wants to do a lot of things. I think it's a matter of time. We have the right talent, we have the right motivation. These people want to do a lot of things. They're not collaborating, they're all working in silos. The moment they start collaborating, I think we will see really good work happening. So yeah, it's not that far-fetched. I think in a couple of years, you will see really interesting projects happening, public sector projects happening in Pakistan as well in technology. I mean, I'd like to hope so at least.
Telling great. So again, I think thank you very much. Bahut shukriya. Really appreciate the time that you took out and the patience with which you explained. I think I'm going to send maybe some of these kids over to you when they get to their final project submission stage in this course for your commentary, for your feedback, and for your guidance.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me. It's obviously always a pleasure to talk to young people in Pakistan and share knowledge. So please let me know if anybody wants any additional detail, want to talk, discuss something offline. Jawad bhai can probably share my email address. Very happy to assist in any way I can. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Waqas. Thank you so much.
Sir, thank you so much for taking out time for us.
No, you're welcome. Absolutely. Okay,
Thank you.
have a good evening and a very great weekend, all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Nafis.